this is the first video of mine you have found, you probably did not arrive here by accident. You typed something into a search bar, probably at an hour where most people are asleep, trying to put words to something that is really hard to put words to. So let me start with something that nobody says out loud. At some point in this, whether you're in a deep crash, months into recovery that does not feel like recovery, or just trying to make sense of something that happened years ago, you meet a particular kind of loneliness. And what I'm saying is, it is not ordinary loneliness of being apart from people. It is much more disorienting than that. It is a feeling that even among other people who have been through something similar, your version somehow feels different. Your symptoms do not quite match, your timeline does not follow the patterns you are reading about. And when you try to explain it, the closest word that you get to is typically, it's indescribable. I want to tell you plainly at the start, this feeling is not a sign that something is uniquely wrong with you. It is one of the most consistent features of the entire experience itself. And understanding why it happens is one of the most revealing things that I can offer to you. You know, even the most compassionate listener eventually reaches the edge of their ability to follow you. A therapist, a partner, a friend who has been through their own struggles. They reach a point and you can feel it, you know, that gap, the place where your experience becomes untranslatable. And here is why. The territory that you are standing on cannot be reached by someone who hasn't been there. It is below language, it is below thought. It is the body's stored material inside of you. And a loving witness can see you struggling, but they just cannot feel what you feel. A capable therapist can listen very carefully, but they cannot reach where the wound lives inside of you, even if they have done their own work. A partner can hold you and walk beside you, but they cannot translate what is happening in your nervous system into their nervous system that they are living in. And this is not a failure, it is actually the nature of this territory. The body keeps the score in a language that the mind cannot fully translate. So the loneliness you feel is really structural, it's not personal. And it is not because the people around you do not love you, it is because the thing you're inside sits simply below their reach. And there is a second layer to it that the analytical people know very intimately. When our nervous system is in threat mode, as it is during the crash and much of what follows, the thinking brain and the feeling body stop cooperating smoothly. So the body is actually screaming signals of danger. The mind is trying to make sense of those signals, to find the pattern, to locate the exit. And for analytical people, that search becomes obsessive. You read everything, you track every single symptom, you notice variations between your experience and anyone else's. And your brain is trying desperately to do its job of protecting you. It files each difference under evidence that my case is special, that the standard maps do not apply to me. And that is not irrational. It is what an intelligent, pattern seeking mind does when it is frightened and it's trying to gain control. And the tragedy is that it makes the isolation even worse, not better. And the more you zoom into the particulars, the more particular it appears. The more you compare, the more the differences stand out. And underneath all of it, running quietly like a background current, is a belief that formed long before the crash. If people really knew what was going on inside of me, they would not understand. And for many people walking this road, that belief is not new. It is one of the oldest wounds that we carry. Now, think about who this tends to happen to. Before the crash, most people walking this road were, by every outward sign, functioning. Many were highly functioning, capable, driven, organized, reliable. The kind of person that others lean on, the kind of person who appears to have it all together. What was invisible to others and often to themselves was the architecture that made that functioning possible. Beneath the capacity was a nervous system carrying unresolved load, often from far earlier than the events that triggered the crash. And a system in that state does not collapse in an obvious way. It builds, it constructs coping strategies, ways of relating to the world that let it keep moving despite the unresolved pain underneath. And here's the cruel part: those adaptations feel from the inside just like personality, like character, like simply who you are. And some people can become controllers, managing every variable because uncertainty feels intolerable. Others become analyzers, running everything through their mind because if you can understand it precisely enough, maybe you can make it safe. Others become pleasers, learning very early that keeping other people comfortable is one of the most reliable ways to stay out of danger. And these are not flaws, they are feats of survival. The problem is that because they are woven into your identity, when they finally become unsustainable, it does not feel like a coping strategy. It feels like you breaking down, actually. And that is why people who looked the most together so often carry the loneliest version of the collapse. And one of the most disorienting early realizations of recovery, looking back at life before and seeing that for the first time, the shape of what was always there. My own came in pieces over several weeks. I had been numbing without naming it as numbing. I had been running, literally as a metaphor, for years. I had stayed in situations long past the point where I wanted to leave, out of courtesy, out of inability to disappoint. And when I finally saw it all at once, it was like puzzle pieces falling into place. Every one of those behaviors was strategy. None of them were actually me. They were scaffolding built around a wound I had not yet been able to look at directly. And your scaffolding will look different from mine. The overwork, the people pleasing, the withdrawal, the busyness. The strategy will vary. The function is the same, to hold enough stability to keep functioning while the unresolved material stays out of sight. The crash is what happens when that scaffolding comes down and everything that was held out of sight is suddenly all at once in sight. If you have followed this far and felt a flicker of recognition in the coping strategies, in relationship patterns, in the way the analytical mind makes everything feel more isolated, then something important is already happening. Recognition is not the same as resolution, but it is the beginning of no longer being alone in this. The journey ahead is yours, and no map will cover every step of it. But you are not the first person to walk this ground, and you are not uniquely beyond help. The mechanism is shared, and when the surface looks completely different. And there's one more thing worth saying: the very sensitivity that made this so hard, the depth of feeling, the precision of self observation, the refusal to settle for an explanation that does not quite fit, is also what makes recovery so complete. The quality of mind that tracked every ounce of suffering will track every ounce of healing. Nothing will be lost. So, if you take this one thing from this video, let it be this: the loneliness is structural, it's not personal. Stop measuring the love around you by whether anyone can translate what you're inside. Some people will reach further than others. The love is real anyway. This is the first of a series. If it named something that you have felt but could not put into words, subscribe to the next one that finds you and tell me in the comments where it landed and how the next video gets shaped. See you there.